To talk more on the policy conference, ActionSA spokesperson Lerato Ngobeni now joins us via our video link. Lerato, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, a mouthful there that was said today by the leader of your party and the party president being Herman Mashaba. Maybe just take us through, the first day of your first ever policy conference. How did that go for the party?
Good evening, Bali, and good evening to SABC viewers. Bali, I have to say, disclaimer, we're all very exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted. It has been a marathon, but it has been a very fulfilling day. Today we had 3 policy buckets that we were considering. We considered energy, we considered economic prosperity, which is our solution for resolving South Africa's slow economic rate of growth. We also passed education. So it really was a fruitful day. The delegates were really in high spirits. We've all worked very hard for almost a year. Over the last 8 months, we went through all of the documentation with all of our delegates. There were amendments that were proposed. Some passed, some did not. But it really was a momentous milestone for our organization, which is merely really just three years old.
And Lerato, perhaps if you maybe can give us an insight here. You said that the main focuses were economic prosperity, the energy security issue, as well as the education system in this country. Maybe just give us an insight when it comes to the deliberations that went underway, especially, I would say, right now, the most important being the issue around electricity in this country and the economy.
So on energy, which was really interesting, I mean, what came out of today's deliberations was that, in fact, if we had a government that was decisive, that really was about dealing with the issue of energy, and we were focused on having short-term and long-term solution, we could resolve the energy crisis in just over 2 years. I mean, we spoke about the fact that we should continue with independent power production, but also not phase out coal, not as fast as we had anticipated. But in fact, if we opened up the market to ensure that more people can be part of the solution, as opposed to dealing with just a government that's trying to resolve the woes of Eskom, we could definitely resolve this crisis. Now, the substance of what was going to come out of this policy conference, we are going to be holding a press conference at the end where we will outline each and every single one of them. As it is now, we had the drafts, and the drafts have passed. But that's one of the conversations that we had, which was very fruitful.
And Lerato, of course, we are indeed preparing for the 2024 elections. How important is this conference for your party, especially at a time where you are trying to attract more voters in South Africa to vote for your party?
Look, this conference was critical. Up to now, we've been selling ActionSA to South Africa really based on our values and not necessarily on concrete solutions that we are putting on the table. This policy conference is now going to say we're no longer talking values. Everything that we have said about our values, all of our delegates and all of the people who support us, they subscribe to those values. So, for example, we agree that ethical leadership, for example, is a key value that we hold dear in our organization. But how are we going to make sure that we have a government that is ethical, that we have a public service that is professional, that is ethical? And so now, after this policy conference, we will be giving South Africans actual solutions to what it is we're going to do. For example, when we talk education, people will be surprised because a lot of the times, I think ActionSA has been misunderstood, and not without good reason, because we haven't had these solutions on the table. But one of them in education was that actually actioners agree to a free education for those who absolutely cannot afford it. And so that is something that was surprising, that I think South Africans will be surprised that ActionSA is subscribed to that. And so what is big for us is the fact that what came out, which is a very strong point out of this conference, is the fact that we need less government and not more. We need to free the people from too much government. There is, one of the things that came out that I want to share with you. And I had to write this down because it was so jarring when it was said in plenary. The delegates felt, and there's one of the experts who presented to us said, what we must do is not to resolve the poverty problem, but that we need to stop causing poverty as government. And we thought that was really, really jarring.
And of course, your leader, Herman Mashaba, one thing that he has always focused on, even when he was part of the Democratic Alliance, is the issue around illegal immigration in this country. And of course, something that he also touched on there. What has been the reception from those who were there to vote for these policies when it comes to your position as a party, when it comes to illegal immigration?
Look, illegal immigration is something that we've always focused on. The delegates agree that the fight here is to be taken to the state and to government, that we should not be fighting immigrants who are here for various reasons. It is the same thing with poor people, that we should be fighting poverty and not poor people. And so for us is to say that we need a government that is going to strengthen the borders, is going to make it easier for people to come into the country legally and not illegally. Currently, people are incentivized to come into the country illegally. We do have corruption at the borders where people are able to pay officials who are supposed to be securing the borders various amounts from 500 Rand, I guess, until about 3,000 Rand or whatever the amount is, to come in and out of the country willy-nilly. And so for us is to say we need to imbue a culture in our country where lawlessness is eradicated. The rule of law is going to come up tomorrow, and those will be unpacked in more detail. But the plenary definitely agrees that the fight is to be taken to the state, and it is the state that must resolve itself. You can't blame people who are able to come into the country legally. You know, nature doesn't like voids. If people see a gap, they will take it. And so it is important for the state to do its job in this regard.
And Lerato, lastly, when it comes to the multi-party charter or the Moonshot Pact, do you think that this has a potential to harm your party when you go to the polls? Because this is clearly not a mandate from your voters, especially at a time where you are trying to let more South Africans vote for your party, even though you have signed this Moonshot Pact.
Look, I think it's a mischaracterization that our voters do not support the multi-party charter. The Moonshot, I have to tell you, Mbali, has died a natural death. Mashaba tells you it was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere, and he was one of the mourners, but he has no idea where it is. So it is the multi-party charter for South Africa. We ran polls and spoke to our delegates and our supporters to say, should we go ahead and do this? This was informed by the fact that, we have experience after the 2021 local government elections. It takes such a short time to negotiate coalitions. And so we wanted to go in, after the 2024 elections, having negotiated on a values-based charter. Now, one of the questions I was asked today, and I'm going to repeat the answer, is to say, we went into the multi-party charter negotiations in good faith. If other parties choose to do something different afterwards, it is entirely their prerogative. But I have to tell you that we are contesting these elections on our own steam, and we don't think this is going to hurt us. In fact, all of us are going to be proposing different solutions to the South African voter, and then we'll see each other at the polls. After that, it'll depend on who has what electoral mandate to be able to take to the table of negotiation.
All right then, Lerato, thank you so much for your time here on The Late Edition.